Hey there, guitar fanatics. If you were to ask me what the most important thing is for a developing lead guitarist to learn and start to gain some mastery over, I would answer immediately that you should learn the major scale, forwards and backwards, inside and out. But what does it really mean to master a scale? If I stop to think about what knowing the major scale means to me, I'd obviously think of the notes of the scale, but also that there's triads and seventh chords associated with each of those notes. And there's modes associated with each of those notes, and all the different possible fingering patterns for all of those things. But here's a simple question for you, and if your answer is no, then you really need to watch this video. If I picked a key, and I picked a random note from that key anywhere on the guitar neck, and I asked you without hesitation to start improvising from that note over a chord progression from that key, could you do it? Would you get stuck? Would you have to stop and think about it? If that's the case, well then you really don't know the scale well enough yet. But check it out. I think I've come up with the perfect practice exercise to truly help you ingrain and master the major scale. We've got some work to do and I can't wait to get started because I know it's gonna improve your guitar playing exponentially. I'm Charlie Long. Thanks for checking out the channel. Let's play some guitar. Perfect practice exercise, huh, Charlie? I realize that's a big claim, but here's why I'm saying it without blinking an eye. This one exercise will help you not only learn the triads of a major key, but once you learn it, you're going to be able to transition from triads to the notes of the major scale anywhere on the neck instantly and fluidly. I say this all the time. Just memorizing a finger pattern is not knowing a scale. Your knowledge has to be functional, and this exercise is going to give you that. It's going to take a little work on your part, but the payoff is going to be huge. So let's dig into this exercise. We're going to be using the G major scale. Here's some quick down and dirty music theory. The major scale, and this is any major scale, has 7 notes. G major has the notes G, A, B, C, D, E, and F sharp. We could also call these notes by the numerical place they have in the scale. The root, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh. We build the chords in the major scale by taking every other note. Let's start with the root, the third, and the fifth, and we stack those 3 notes together to form what we call a triad. We can do that with each of the 7 notes of the scale. And in a major key, we'll get 3 major triads, 3 minor triads, and a diminished triad. We get a major triad if the middle note is 4 frets above the first note, like this in the G major triad with G, B, and D. We get a minor triad if the middle note is 3 frets above the first note, like in this A minor triad with the notes A, C, and E. And the diminished triad is made up of notes that are all 3 frets apart. Now the examples so far are showing the notes on just one string for an easy visual, but obviously we don't play the guitar like that. So let's get our exercise going by moving the D note of the G major triad to the A string, and we have this shape. And the first variation of the exercise is to play the triad G, B, and D, and then go to the next note in the G major scale, which would be the E note at the 7th fret of the A string, and play the scale back down to the starting note G at the 3rd fret of the low E string. Next, we have a pair of minor triads. We have A minor and B minor. So play the A minor triad, and we would go to the F sharp above the E note and play back down to A. Play the B minor triad, go to the G note above that F sharp, play back down to B. Next, we're going to have 2 major triads, C and D. Play the C triad, go to the A note and play down to C. Play the D triad, go to the B note, play down to the D. The next triad would be E minor. We're going to play that triad, we're going to go to the C note above the B here and play down to the E. And then the 7th triad in the key is F sharp diminished. So we play that triad and we go to the D note and play down to F sharp. And that brings us back to our root, the G major triad. So we've gone through the entire major scale, and the triads were major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, major. And I'd want you to practice this first variation of the exercise until you can play it smoothly and uninterrupted like this, all the way up the neck. That's variation 1. Now we just played on the low E and A strings, but ultimately I'd want you to be able to do that exercise on any 2 strings. Now here's G, A minor, and B minor on the low E and A strings, but we could easily play those on the A and D strings, or the D and G strings. Now, we don't have time in a YouTube video to go through all the positions on all the strings, but if you really want to master this stuff, ultimately that's what you have to do. Let's move on to perfect exercise variation 2. In variation 2, we're going to add the D string to the E and A. And starting with our G major triad, that gives us the G note at the 5th fret of the D string. And like variation number 1, we're going to play the triad and then go up to the next note in the scale, which would be A at the 7th fret. And then play back down to the root of the triad. Next, we would have A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor, F sharp diminished, and then we'd be back to G up an octave from where we started. This variation gives us the triad, the root note of the triad up an octave from where we started, and then a descending scale run that starts on the note in the scale above the root of the triad. Just something to be aware of as you're playing through the exercise. You can see that this exercise is helping us ingrain multiple things. We're putting together different triad shapes. We're learning the triads within a key and whether they're major, minor, or diminished. And we're putting together fingering patterns of the major scale starting on different notes. This is great stuff, and stick with me here because we're going to take it up another notch in variation number 3. You may have already guessed this, but in variation 3, we're going to add another string, the G string. Starting at our G major triad, this is going to give us the notes G and B, D, G, and B again. Now from the B note on the G string, in this variation, we're going to play up 2 notes to the D at the 7th fret, and then back down to our G at the 3rd fret of the low E. Let's take it through the key and on up the neck. Here we'd have A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor, F sharp diminished, and that brings us all the way back to G major. Now we're really starting to stretch out both the arpeggio and the scale patterns. This is really getting good. Oh, and something that just occurred to me. We've been ascending in our examples, but you should practice starting up high on the neck and descending like this also. And it's really important that you practice until you can play it continually like I just did. It doesn't have to be fast, but I want you to get to the point where all these shapes and patterns, they just start to flow together. When things start to have that kind of continuity, you know you're approaching mastery level. Okay, on to variation number 4. In variation number 4, we're adding a 5th string, so we'll be playing from the low E string to the B string. Starting with the G major arpeggio, that would give us the notes G, B, D, G, B, D. We're up on the B string now, and from there, we're going to jump up to the G at the 8th fret, and we're going to descend through a 2-octave scale pattern back down to the G root on the low E string. And that's the formula for this variation. Play through the triad arpeggio to the first note on the B string, and then shift to the root note of the arpeggio above that and play a descending 2-octave scale. So here's G major again. A minor. B minor. C major, D major, E minor, F sharp diminished, and that brings us back to G major. So a couple of things to think about here. It's important to play all the variations of this exercise, even variation 1, which was just on 2 strings. Why? Because each variation made us start our scale pattern on a different note on a different string. I have lots of students that memorize 2-octave scale patterns, but they usually practice by playing through the whole pattern. They often have a really hard time if I ask them to start in the middle of it or start from a random note. We just played all of our examples in the key of G, but there are 12 keys, and it's very important to play your practice exercises in each of those 12. If we're going to do this, let's do it right. Make sure you practice starting at the bottom of the fretboard, working upward, and at the top of the fretboard, working downward. And we're ingraining several things with this one exercise. The notes of the scale, some triads, some scale patterns. As you're playing through them, take some time to think about the notes that are in the triads. Think about the notes that are in the scale patterns. If you don't know your notes of the fretboard really well, we're ingraining those too. Now, for the sake of time, we're going to stop there, but there are several other variations we could do, like using different inversions of the triads or using 7th chords. I could go on and on, but this is already a lot to practice, and I hope you're going to do just that. This is the kind of exercise that will take your fretboard knowledge to an entirely different level. And as I said before, when you get to the point where you can play through all the variations smoothly, continuously, and without having to think about it too much, then you're approaching the point of mastery. So I hope you'll give the video a like. I hope you subscribe to the channel. I'm putting out innovative lessons like this every week to help you understand the fretboard and to help you move your lead guitar skills forward. As I always say, work hard, play hard, have lots of fun, and never stop learning. Thanks for watching.